Hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation by SideFX Software. I just want to say a quick thank you to the Creative Pixel Academy for having us on the stream today to be able to present a little bit about our product, Houdini, and be able to introduce you to that. Thank you to Benedict for inviting me here today to talk to you. We're just really excited to be able to kind of present what our software can do and hopefully get you introduced a little bit to how it works and get you interested in some of the things that you could do with Houdini while you're working on your various projects. So this presentation, like I said, is going to be an introduction to Houdini. So let's dive in and get started. So my name is Peter Arcara. I'm one of the training leads at SideFX here, and what we're going to be talking about today, like I said, is features and kind of the overall effects and techniques that you can do within Houdini. So this presentation will be sort of an introductory presentation. It'll show some real beginner stuff, but then it'll also show some more advanced things that you could certainly do within Houdini and be able to kind of push it to whatever limit you might be interested in taking it to. So with that, let's get started and we'll take a look at our presentation today. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is SideFX? What is this company that I work for and that makes Houdini? So SideFX has been recognized as an industry leader for our software for years now. We've actually just was recently one of our team members won an Academy Award, a technical award for our work in working with volumetric data in the industry called VDB. And so the gentleman on the far left in that image was the one that won that Oscar. And this is kind of some of our senior team leaders, and we've been recognized quite a few times for our software across different parts of the industry. We've been awarded an Emmy as well, and also have been used in feature films for years. So we really pride ourselves in the kind of in where we sit within the media and entertainment, film and TV world. However, there's a lot of other uses for our Houdini product, and you'll see that as we kind of walk through this presentation a little bit more. So let's talk about what Houdini actually is. Houdini is a procedural system where actions happen kind of from top to bottom in a recipe type situation, where we build these networks that have a process that we want them to do, and then each of these nodes executes a function for us, have a task that they do, and passes that data down through the network. And you'll see an example of this in a second to show a little bit more clearly what it is that we're talking about and how this works in actual practice. But you'll hear this word procedural used a lot. So let's talk about what proceduralism actually is. So what is proceduralism? And a good thing to do whenever we talk about this is to first kind of stop and say, what is non-procedural workflows? And so this is a process that's kind of a locked order of edits, where you do something, that process is saved, and then from there, you can maybe undo it and redo it. But once you've kind of made that decision, you're stuck there. You would have to kind of start back from the beginning to be able to continue, to be able to redo something. So this is kind of like carving a broomstick, from a tree, using hand tools. You're kind of chiseling away at it, and once you take those pieces away, that's kind of it. It's gone for good. And so that's kind of the process of non-procedural workflows. And so we try to keep Houdini as completely procedural as possible. So let's talk about what proceduralism is. So proceduralism is the idea of processes that kind of make results based on certain inputs or recipes in our network. And so this is a non-destructive way of working. We're not deleting data. We're not getting rid of things. We're able to keep all of our information as we kind of flow through our tree of nodes. And this process works a bit more like a factory does. And so to kind of go back to that example we just talked about a second ago, if we had, say we were trying to make a broomstick from a log, right? In a factory, you would have a machine that would do that and would have certain settings that would allow it to kind of carve that wood down to a certain size. And then out the other end, you'd get broomsticks, right? Well, let's just say you wanted to change that to be some sort of I don't know, maybe a bat of some sort, like a baseball bat or a cricket bat or something like that, and you're carving away at this wood, well, you're going to change the parameters because the shape of that's a little bit different. So that's kind of the idea of how we can take something like a process, and in Houdini we make these almost like little factories that take information up at the top and put some sort of output down at the end. And so that's what we'll take a look at here next and see kind of the working process of actually being in Houdini and moving things around and working with these networks. So this is a really simple scene that I set up. And up at the top, we have our inputs into the system. And what we're going to do is we're going to first place this object on this ground plane, select some polygons, extrude them, and then we have an output at the bottom. So each of those little nodes in the tree there, as that blue flag goes down, that's what we're looking at in the network. And so as we move down there, we're going to take these inputs up at the top and pass them through. We have a little switch there, that green box, and we're going to switch between these different objects that we have up at the top. We have a couple test geometries that we'll be able to switch through using this node right here. So I'm going to bring up a little parameter. It's going to allow me to switch between those different objects. You'll kind of see the highlighting change on those wires. So we're going to first place these on the ground plane, and let's change that switch and see how that affects it. So now each of those objects, as we wire it in, is going to be placed on that ground plane. So this is, now we're doing the random polygon selection. You can see those dark selections that we're doing. Those are going to just randomly be applied. And then we can come down here, move our little blue flag down to the very output. And then as we switch back and forth, we'll see that now those random polygons are selected on those objects. And this is the idea of working in a procedural way where our information is always live. We can switch things. We can switch inputs up at the top. In this case, we're putting in different geometries. We're not changing any of the parameters kind of this network. We're actually changing the geometry that's coming in. And so we can run that same process along that new geometry as we go through. So this is kind of how working with Houdini looks. You have a viewport on the left, you have a node system on the right, and you change your little display flag as you move through there, that little blue highlight, and that allows you to kind of change what part of the network you're looking at. So you might be asking, well, what can you do with Houdini? There's obviously some limitations, right? And sure, of course, there's limitations like in any software, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do. And I apologize for my little box here being over some of this, but what we really pride ourselves in is a lot of physical phenomenon like simulation, like fire, smoke, water, sand, cloth, all these different things like that. Tons of different types of simulation that you can do. But we also have things like modeling and animation that can be done. We can set up rendering and look development, creating textures and shaders on objects. There's a lot of different parts and pieces that Houdini is able to kind of be a part of in the workflow of creating 3D, renders and geometry and things like that. So this is kind of a list of what Houdini can do. It's a very just brief list. It was kind of the best that I could come up with and kind of just jot a bunch of things down. But this is an idea of what the things you can do with Houdini. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these features throughout this presentation, but this just gives you an idea that even these things I'm talking about, this isn't the whole picture. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different things that can actually be done with the software. So let's talk a little bit about, where people use Houdini in the industry, like what types of tasks are done using Houdini. So like I mentioned, film and television are big places where we use where our software is used. And that's kind of our bread and butter. That's kind of where we live a lot of time. That's some of our biggest clients, and is really what most of the things that you see Houdini used out kind of publicly. That's what we kind of pride ourselves in. However, there's lots of other parts of the industry that use it. For example, video games. Video games use our software to do level design and also to create procedural assets for working within game development engines. And so what you can actually do is take those networks that we're talking about, actually save them as a file, and then run them in other things like Unity or Unreal to be able to kind of use Houdini as a plugin almost to create assets for your game or for your for whatever production you might be working on. So that's one thing that you can use. Machine learning, it's very popular for that, to create training data or environments to train in. You could kind of imagine like if you had a self-driving car or something like that, and you wanted to create a bunch of cities for this, vehicle to kind of test it in driving, you can actually create these different worlds. And as you change the parameters of those cities or worlds, it'll update and you can get different options to be able to kind of, train your data on. Another thing is product design. People use it to do quick iterations for making different types of products and things like that. I saw a gentleman that does some work with making shoes and like making better, almost like biometrics in the shoes and getting electronics in there, and using Houdini to be able to kind of quickly make processes and make variations on the way that these electronics might be placed in there. There's things like that you could do to really quickly kind of iterate through things. Another thing is medical visualization. Obviously, you can't always have a person to be able to test doctors on and train them on, so you don't want to do that in a real life situation. So having a medical visualization that doctors can go in and learn on that is going to look as realistic and behave kind of as realistically as possible, that's a real benefit for not only the doctors in learning, but obviously the entire medical community to be able to train better doctors and things like that. So that's a big part of it as well. And also visualizing things that are happening on scales that we can't see to be able to make sense of what's happening at these, really tiny scales. Another part is motion graphics, commercials and things like that. That's actually the industry that I came from. And working with, making products and things like that and animating them. You've probably all seen Nike commercials where shoes are building themselves and all that type of thing. Those are really popular cases for using Houdini in motion graphics and advertising. And then finally, AR and VR is obviously kind of this always evolving space. Apple obviously just recently came into that space pretty strongly. And a lot of these assets that they use in these visualizations have to be processed from maybe existing sets of assets. And so going through and processing that geometry is something that Houdini is great at because, again, it's kind of a factory. So you could bring a bunch of objects that were used or created somewhere else and process them and make them ready to be used in that AR or VR world. So just some different places where Houdini is used to just kind of get your mind around the idea of what it is that, Houdini does. So let's take a look at a couple quick examples of kind of our film and television. In this case, it's mainly the film. And these are videos that are on our website, and there's greater breakdowns and they talk about these quite a bit, but let's take a look at these videos. This is from Disney. This is from Frozen 2. And this is showing some of how Houdini is used in Frozen. And you'll see a little bit more of this type of, visualization and stuff. But what you're seeing here is a lot of viewport renders like this, and then side-by-sides with the final renders in the actual film. So this is showing kind of how someone would work in Houdini and the way that they can process the different waves coming in, the particle effects and things like that, and then finally get to a final render that's going to come out in the actual film. So this is one scene. Another really cool scene is this big fog curtain. This was done with Houdini, and you might think, how would you make a big fog curtain that opens up like this? Well, you would maybe simulate a big curtain that's kind of laying on the ground and then turn it into fog using different tools in Houdini. So this is a really interesting example of where you could actually take something like a piece of cloth, make it gigantic on a huge scale, and then be able to kind of direct it and move it around the way that the director would want, or maybe a creative person is trying to get this vision kind of on screen. So really interesting way to kind of look at this process being done. And then another really cool example is The Lion King. And this shows a bunch of different types of simulations that were done in Houdini. Here's, water simulations. There was a sand simulation or grain simulation at the beginning. Here's some hair that's actually was using part of our tool set to be able to make that happen. And then obviously fire as well. So this kind of shows the broad range of different things that you can do using a piece of software like Houdini that has all of these simulation capabilities within them. So I think it's an interesting kind of look at some, at also how these scenes are just dressed to the camera. And what I mean by that is that if there's something that's happening off screen, you're not making those objects and trying to keep those, just trying to make the entire world, you're only making what the actual camera can see. In fact, in this example here, you can see that very well. And with this sand, it's only the top that's being simulated, things like that. So it's really some interesting, looks into how these effects are done within, a large film like this. So obviously great to be able to see these things from Disney and them share that with us. And like I said, you can see more about these on our website as well. There's some breakdowns there. So let's talk a little bit about the different features of Houdini, because I think it'll be interesting to see some of the different, kind of breakdowns of what can you do in Houdini, and not just what can Disney or what can these huge film studios do, but as a regular user, what can I do using Houdini? So what we're going to show is a bunch of different examples of really kind of simplistic things that you can do with these different tasks, whether it's cloth or, building destruction or whatever. And then also, what is the, what is a more advanced type of situation that you could do with something like Houdini? So we'll look at a kind of basic example and then a little bit, and then a more advanced example. Sometimes these will be very, quite a bit more advanced. Other times they'll be a little bit kind of intermediate level. So let's take a look at a few different things here. The first thing I want to talk about is particle simulations. This is kind of a nice entry point for anybody getting into using something like Houdini. So particle simulations are pretty simple to set up. They don't take a lot of time or effort. They don't take a lot of computer power to process. So they're a really great way to be able to kind of get your feet wet in the world of making simulations. In this case, I built these two different objects, or these two different scenes, and on the left we're basically blowing these particles around with wind, and I've just kind of colored them so that you can kind of visualize them a little bit more intuitively. The color isn't really driven by anything, but you can see that I've made some trails on these particles as they move through, so they're kind of lines now instead. And on the left, we've added a wind that is kind of more slow moving, kind of larger wind gusts that are kind of pushing these particles around. And on the right, we have a more chaotic system of pushing those particles around. So really all I did here was added a sphere to my scene, added a particle network that's going to emit some particles from this, and then added some wind as an effect on top of that. So this is a very straightforward kind of process to make something, with particles like this. And then to kind of take this to the next step, you can start doing some really interesting effects like disintegration, and you could either build something or disintegrate it using some particles and cutting geometry like this. And this is a bit more of an advanced effect, but it certainly is something that, a person that has a reasonable amount of experience in Houdini can set up relatively quickly. So this is certainly something that you could go in and make happen, with a few interesting tutorials or things like that. These are great kind of entry points getting into simulation. So this is a really nice kind of way to see, this is obviously not final renders or anything that are ready to go to a film festival or something like that, but this is an example of working in the viewport in Houdini and what that would look like. So let's also talk about rigid body dynamics. And so this is RBD. And in this case, what we'll be looking at is a really simple just box. I basically made a box, turned it in the scene a little bit, and used one of our fracturing nodes, material fracturing nodes, that allows us to cut up this geometry in a way that looks kind of like, concrete or something like that. And so here we have a bunch of pieces that are coming off of this, and I've colored the inside yellow so you can kind of see these inside faces that weren't on the outside of this geometry as it breaks up. And this, again, is a very straightforward process. We basically tell it how we want it to fracture, take this object, put it into a simple simulation, a node that actually runs that simulation, and we let kind of the play bar go, and it simulates the gravity and things like that for us. So this is a really good example of how you can start to get your mind around working with rigid bodies. And when you start to get into something that's a bit more advanced, you can start adding things in like forces, little explosions and things like that. You can also put different types of fracturing into your simulations. In this case, we have things like wood, glass, stone, and those are all actually built-in presets in our destruction nodes. So while this looks really, really intense and there's a lot of stuff going on here, we're actually using a lot of really standard tools within Houdini to be able to do some of these things. And as you get more and more familiar with working with forces, working with geometry and things like that, you'll be able to set up a simulation like this on your own, and actually you could build a little house and break it like this. So there's lots of really interesting things that you can do with these RBD simulations. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some maybe other natural phenomenon like fluids. So we have an entire simulation framework called FLIP, which is just the name of our particle simulation solvers and things like that. And these are actually presets that exist in our FLIP world. And so these you can actually just type down FLIP configure lava, FLIP configure waves. You can get these different presets set up for you, and you can take a look at how these actually work. So while they look like really like advanced things to be doing, like making lava or making our little pool toy there melt, you can actually drop these things down in your network with just a simple typing command and just say, hey, give me just a kind of a preset of what this looks like. And then you can go through that recipe or that process that it drops down into the network for you, and you can look at them and see all the different properties there, see what settings have been done. And this has all been done by the developers of the software so that you can have kind of a starting point to be able to work from. And then as you advance into more and more deeper and deeper parts of the process, you can start to build things like this that actually have waves and white water, all of those nice bubbles and churns from the waves, splashes, and all sorts of different things like this where characters can interact with it. Lots of really, really in-depth things that you can do with these tools. And they're used, like I said, quite a bit in films and across the industry to be able to do these types of effects. So it's a really exciting kind of part of our tool set. I think it's a really visually can be really visually stunning to see the outcome of them. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to kind of see these simulations that you give these starting parameters to. You tell it how dense you want the water to be, if you want it to be the like fluid to be goopy or to be regular water, and then you can simulate it and see how these effects come through in the end. So it's a really fun thing to be able to kind of play around with these different physical effects. Fire is another one that's really popular for people to use, especially with film. When you see things blowing up and exploding in films, a lot of times that is our software that's helping that happen. And so again, we have presets that can be added in the viewport. These are just all, again, just you hit tab, type in configure pyro, which is the name of our fire kind of suite of nodes. If you say configure pyro something, it'll give you a list of all these different things. There's an explosions, there's billowy smoke, there's flames, there's muzzle shots. And so all of these different things that you're seeing here in this presentation are all presets that you can just take a look at. Again, look at the network, see how they're set up, and then go from there and tweak them to do something that you might be more interested in. And once you start to master those things, you can really push these things really far and build huge explosions, build huge fires. You could put a city on fire, a building on fire, maybe blow up a spaceship, all sorts of different things that you could obviously do with these things. But the really nice thing is, and that we try to do along the way, is make sure that artists have ways to be able to control their vision. And so when you see an effect like this, all of these kind of spreading circles and the way that the ground is kind of billowing up, we actually have ways to control that using different nodes in our network. And you can actually just animate how those kind of rings will expand, or how the ground is going to, where the ground is going to kind of puff up like that as it sort of kicks up dust. So there's lots of really controllable, art directable ways to be able to do these different effects and looks. And obviously this is it's a really interesting thing to kind of give a starting parameter to a big effect like this, and then watch it evolve and see how it looks, and you can then tweak it along the way. So really fun stuff to play with, and obviously a really deep kind of topic to dive further and further into. So let's kind of change gears a little bit. Recently, we've really pushed ourselves into kind of this character animation world where we're trying to up our game in how we present and are able to work with characters in Houdini. We've been able to do this for a really long time, but we just recently released Houdini 20, and in that release, there was a really big update to how some of our characters work. And so the viewport is much nicer to work with characters, and if you've ever worked with any character animation before, you'll see some of these things and they'll feel familiar. It won't feel like anything that groundbreaking, but we do offer some really interesting things because we are Houdini and we have so much history with effects and doing different types of simulation. So there's some really interesting things that we can actually bring to the game in that regard. So here, let's first just take a look at what character animation looks like in Houdini. So again, this is just an artist that's working in Houdini, just posing this chicken. Lots of just viewport controls that they're able to use. Different ways that the rigs can be set up. The invisible kind of skeleton inside of these characters. And so we have lots of different ways to be able to manipulate that within our software. Set up the character rigs so that the artists can go in then and edit them and work around with them. So these are this is kind of just the way that artists work here in the viewport, and shows some of the ways that we try to make sure that this is as comfortable and fast for them as possible. And this is sped up, obviously, but it's very, very interactive within the viewport in general. So hopefully that gives you an idea for how some of our character animation looks. And then to kind of go to the next step, we can add in some of the effects thing that we did previously with characters as well. So that's obviously called character effects. And there's some really interesting things we can do here, like cloth and hair and a whole bunch of other things like that. But we'll just look kind of at cloth and hair specifically in this presentation. So this is a little setup I made. This is a capybara. That's one of our test geometries. And I just gave him a little cape there. And this took me maybe all of 15 minutes to set up. It was very quick, was not a difficult thing to set up, and allows us to be able to add clothing to these different characters that we might have in our scene, and then simulate them using our tool set to be able to do that, which is called Vellum. And so you can obviously investigate that on your own. And so this is our capybara with a little cloth added to it, kind of a basic example of it. But then you can take something like this and go even further with it to an example like this, where you have multiple characters that have different types of clothes. In this case, they're both kind of this like light silk material. We can add different kind of constraints to the cloth, whether it's elastic on the bottom of their ankles, or maybe the belt around the one character there. This just shows kind of the vast variety of different types of clothing effects that you could do using Houdini, and then simulate them with your character effects or your character animation. And then, like we saw earlier, we saw the lion from Lion King. Obviously, here's a different lion that we've kind of had an artist animate for us. But you can see these blue hairs that you're seeing right now are the guide hairs, or what we're actually simulating. And then when we get to our final render like this, we add in multiple more hairs into the system, sometimes up to the millions, to be able to get a really nice dense hair, final hair groom. While at this point, while we're looking at just this kind of sparse hair, that is what we call guide hairs, and those allow us to be able to simulate them quite a bit more efficiently, and then match those up in space to the other hairs that would be around it. So they kind of work in these little clumps, and you can blend in different amounts between those guide hairs, which one's influencing which of the final, maybe, like I said, millions of hairs on the character. So this is how our hair simulations and character workflows kind of go. And again, this is our Vellum tool set that we use for this. So let's talk a little bit more about characters and talk about motion capture. So that's obviously a really popular thing in the film industry, in games, in television, is capturing someone's movement and then applying it to a character. So we have lots of tools in Houdini that allow for us to do these types of things. You can see that green animation in the middle. That is a animation from Mixamo of someone just dancing. And we've taken these characters that came from Epic Games and applied that animation to these various different sizes of characters. So you can see that kind of no matter what size or scale they are, we can actually match their skeletons and match their animations together so that whether it's a normal humanoid character or a huge rock character or robots, we can try to keep that original performance, intact so that we can kind of present that to these other characters, right? And so this is one way that we can kind of manipulate motion capture data. Another way that we can do it is blending between actual simulation and hand created animation. So this first bit is a bit of motion capture, and then when he kind of goes limp, it turns into what we call a ragdoll simulation, where he kind of just falls in like limp, and then at the very end he actually moves into this green section where he's a keyframed character that an artist actually made. So we start with motion capture, move into a simulation, and then back to keyframe animation. And so this is a lot of really interesting, intricate things that that we can go back and forth between and are able to kind of control how these characters move and are animated in our scenes. So that's kind of the look that I wanted to go through with our our features and things like that in Houdini. But I wanted to allow you to kind of see our client reel and see all the different ways in which these things are used. And I think as you go through it, you're going to see some of these things that we're that we've talked about here, these different effects and simulation types. You'll start to see them in these videos and say, oh, there's that type of simulation, or there's that type of simulation. And hopefully you'll start to connect some of these dots as to how Houdini was used in these different clients' work. So I'm going to be quiet and just let this reel play down, and you can get a little sense for some of the ways that our clients use our software. So. right. So that's going to sort of wrap up my presentation, but I do want to bring one more thing just to your attention, and that is that all this stuff might seem like it's a really, it's all great, but how would I get access to it? So let's just really quickly, I just want to show you how you can actually get access to these, to this product. So here's our website, SideFX.com. If you're interested in getting a free learning version of Houdini, you can go under the Get tab here, actually download, and you can get a free version to be able to play with and start to learn on this way. The only thing really that you're limited to is being able to send information around to other products. So if you're trying to send, move geometry between different programs, you're going to run into some issues there. But in this case, if you're just looking to kind of make a simulation in Houdini, render it out, you can render out with a watermark. It's really very full featured as far as working and being able to learn how to do these processes here. So please go on here, download Houdini and start playing around with it. We also have a lot of tutorials here and learning paths. There's a start here section where you can actually go in, and there's foundational material here to be able to learn Houdini, be able to start start working with these models, making models, working with simulations, all sorts of different things. My coworker Rob McGee has put out all these great videos here, and I think they'll really help you be able to start getting up and running within Houdini itself. So please go to our website. We have lots of tutorials, lots of different things there that you can take a look at, and even a content library that you can go to and download different models and scenes to be able to take a look at as well. So that is our product and where you can go and get it. So again, my name's Peter Arcara. Thank you so much for being a part of this presentation, for joining us on this, during this stream. And if you do end up watching this and after the fact and are interested in Houdini, please check out SideFX.com for more information about our product and things that you can do with it. Hopefully we're just, again, really thankful to Benedict and those at Creative Pixel having us here and being able to present what Houdini is and how it could possibly work for you. So thank you very much for watching. And I think we'll sign off there, and hope you have a great ARTFEST, and best of luck in all of your different projects that you're working on. So thank you so much for joining us.